Hello, my YouTube pals. I am back. It is your boy Julian, aka the Cozy Representative, back in the flesh. Yes, it is me. I will address it, the elephant in the room. I have cut my hair. This is what I look like with no hair, or just very little hair. I've been a little self-conscious about it, but I'm starting to like it. We're right in the dead middle of summer, you know what I'm saying? So it's hot. It's hot as balls. It was all damaged and dry, and I had to get it off of my head. So here I am. Today's video is going to be, I believe I covered 7 essential Rise Records core / CRABCORE era metalcore. If you were around at this time, you know what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the era between I want to say 2007 and 2011 is what I'm talking about, of the metalcore that was happening at the time. In this video, I refer to this style as RISECORE a lot of the time, because most of these releases that I'm talking about, and most of them at the time, were on the label Rise Records. Also referred to as CRABCORE, which was made popular by the band Attack Attack, which, if you don't know who they are or what CRABCORE is, stay tuned, because I do talk about it. But if you're here, you probably do know what that is and what I'm talking about. So obviously you know that this was a pretty wild era of culture. Obviously, it was very hated on at the time, and now it's looked back on as just, wow, what a relic. I was around then. I wasn't really a metalcore kid per se, but I had plenty of friends who were. I was around it. I enjoyed some of the bands. So yeah, today I just thought we'd crack into what I think are 7 essential albums from this time. So without further ado, here we go. Here we begin with The Devil Wears Prada's second full-length album entitled Plagues. Produced by the man who produced most of these RISECORE albums, Joey Sturgis, it was first released in 2007 with its original album cover, before being re-released in 2008 with a different cover art, which is probably more recognizable to people, as well as a DVD on this re-released version, featuring live videos as well as some music videos on there. This album was one of the first big landmarks in the Rise Records era, in my opinion, setting a standard and often being emulated and ripped off by other bands in the genre, who rose to popularity after the release of Plagues. The Devil Wears Prada were a force to be reckoned with in metalcore at the time. While they didn't create the genre or invent the wheel, so to speak, they refined it and brought it to new heights with their sophomore release. The songs are frantic, upbeat, and in your face. The guitar riffs are well written and well performed, and the breakdowns and chugging don't feel cheesy or out of place. One problem that a lot of these RISECORE bands had was the cheesiness and tackiness of the unnecessary amount of breakdowns and dubstep sections. However, The Devil Wears Prada's usage of halftime chugging isn't cringy or overbearing. The use of synths on this album add an extra layer of sonic depth, and it meshes super well with the overall sound of the record. The album is primarily centered around the brutal screams of vocalist Mike Hranica, although there are also clean vocals provided by rhythm guitarist Jeremy DePoister. This scream clean dynamic was following in the footsteps of, say, Spencer and Aaron from Under Oath, and The Devil Wears Prada's Jeremy DePoister's clean vocals definitely set a standard emulating by many other bands in the RISECORE scene. Overall, Plagues was a great record and certainly holds up to this day. It was monumental in the scene at the time and propelled The Devil Wears Prada to becoming one of the biggest bands in the wave at the time. And for these reasons, I definitely think it deserves a place in this list of essential RISECORE albums. Yes. Nothing says iconic quite like metalcore powerhouses Attack Attack's 2008 Rise Records debut, Someday Came Suddenly. Now, I will say this. Musically speaking, I definitely think the best Attack Attack album is actually their 2010 self-titled sophomore effort. However, the reason I chose to put Someday Came Suddenly on this list is because of the sheer impact this specific record had on the scene due to many reasons. For starters, it was the first album in history to feature both Austin Carlile, who went on to front of Mice and Men, and Caleb Shomo, who went on to front Beartooth, two very important men in the scene, if you will. The instrumental interlude, which became a viral dance routine started by some college, which Michelle Obama eventually danced along to in 2012, which is really fucking nuts. And of course, the biggest reason, Stick Stickly and its unforgettable, earth-shattering music video. This video blew up when it came out way back 10 years ago, but probably not for the reasons that the members of the metalcore sextet probably hoped. It was relentlessly hated on by heavy metal purists and keyboard warriors alike. In the same era of commonly hated on acts such as Broken Side or the Millionaires, the Stick Stickly was often grouped in with those acts, with its auto-tune drenched vocals as well as the popularization of the CRABCORE dance move. Not really dance move, stage move, I don't know. As well as other goofy dance moves shown in the video. It's kind of like a meme back when before those were around, or maybe those were just getting started. An early meme, if you will. Also, the departure of original vocalist Austin Carlile and the beef between Austin and Attack Attack caused a lot of stir on the internet at the time, with Attack Attack posting an infamous MySpace blog slamming Carlile. We're actually gonna get way into that later at the end of the video when I talk about Of Mice and Men, so stay tuned for that, because there's tea. So, obviously, Attack Attack became viral for being hated on, having scene beef, and having goofy dance moves, everything except for what really should have mattered, which was the music, which is what I will now talk about. Now, at the time, the record's heavier metalcore parts were criticized for being a generic ripoff of the last album I talked about, The Devil Wears Prada's Plagues. Side note, both albums were released on Rise Records, and both produced by Joey Sturgis, which contributes to the common motif that most of these bands were jacking The Devil Wears Prada's style. On the contrast, the pop section of the songs, led by clean vocalist Johnny Frank, were compared to bands like Forever the Sickest Kids. The songs are quick bursts of ADHD rattled energy and come across like an action movie or a Saturday morning cartoon fueled by sugary breakfast cereal. Moving from extreme to extreme, 1 minute it's brutally heavy down-tune section, next minute it's a T-Pain pop chorus, the next minute it's an electronic dance section, every song sounding almost like a completely different band every 20 seconds. I think these contrasts are a testament to how young the band were, as well as how they were obviously pulling many different, styles from many different musical interests that they had. For better or for worse, this is an extremely fun album to listen to, and as I stated, I think they didn't truly hone in their skills until their second record. I think that 10 years later, Someday Came Suddenly can be looked back on as a unique moment in time, and I think they pulled it off rather well. In 2009, 5 young men from England who called themselves Asking Alexandria moved to America to record their electrifying metalcore debut, Stand Up and Scream, with producer Joey Sturgis, and subsequently attempt to take over the world. Side note, every album that I've talked about thus far has been produced by Joey Sturgis, interestingly enough. Also, quick side note, another side note, this album actually wasn't released through Rise Records, rather on Sumerian Records. However, I chose to include this album because of how truly monumental and essential this record was in the wave. Right out of the gates on the opening track, Ilarion, the whole band screams, "Fuck this," in a big gang chant. And much like a gunshot in the air at the start of like a race, the band ignited you into 13 tracks of unrelenting, fiery breakdowns, memorable screaming bits, and biting clean vocal sections, as well as a fair amount of electronics. The band took the strengths that predecessors The Devil Wears Prada, Attack Attack, and Bring Me the Horizon had, and refined them, making their songs catchy and digestible for listeners of all different types of music. One of the band's signature moves on this album were their quotable gang vocal parts, which typically launched into breakdowns, such as "fuck this," or "get on your knees," and other juvenile, vaguely sexual cries of rebellion. Now, let's unpack this a little more. Unlike the last two albums I talked about, vocalist Danny Worsnop had a diverse range of screams displayed through this album, as well as catchy vocal lines and lyrical patterns which leave them sticking with you and running through your head after hearing them, as opposed to just random yelling with the sole intent to sound brutal. Not to mention he also has a great singing voice with way more respectable choruses and hooks than Someday Came Suddenly or Plagues. His thick British accent also switches things up in his vocal stylings and makes it more interesting to listen to. The drums on this album are insanely tight and well played. The drummer dude is a beast, and it sounds almost machine-like. Even the drums are catchy and pop out at you during choruses and breakdown sections alike. The only thing that is lacking on this album are the guitars. It's mostly just rhythm parts and open chugging, or sort of Avenged Sevenfold style riffs, and they do the job well enough, but they bring nothing super interesting to the table. Overall, this album was huge and groundbreaking at the time. The band blew up super quick, and the album was a scene favorite, and much like Plagues when it came out, or Someday Came Suddenly even, a new standard was set. The genre was now being pushed to new heights as well. Asking Alexandria's second album, Reckless and Relentless, debuted at number 9 on the Billboard Top 200. For the next few years, the scene was plagued with blatant stand-up and scream era Asking Alexandria ripoffs, such as Capture the Crown or Make Me Famous, whose singer, Dennis, actually went on to be Asking Alexandria's fucking vocalist for one album cycle when their original vocalist, Danny, briefly left the band, while Asking Alexandria themselves moved further and further away from their metalcore roots as time went on, into a more classic rock, hard rock direction, Danny Worsnop eventually going full-on hair metal, and then after that turning into somewhat of an Americanized country singer. No one could have predicted this path for Asking Alexandria. However, the creation of 5 metalcore-loving scene kids from England stand up and scream will forever live on in all of its hair-straightened glory. Moving right along to We Came as Romans' 2009 debut, To Plant a Seed. Now this album was actually released on Equal Vision as opposed to Rise, kind of like the Asking Alexandria album, but also much like Asking Alexandria, because of its impact and prevalence on the whole RISECORE wave, it was hard to ignore. And I also must add that this album, once again, was produced by none other than, say it with me, Joey Sturgis. Anyways, without beating around the bush, To Plant a Seed is a very solid entry into the metalcore ring, bringing solid instrumentals, unique and vibey lead guitar lines, as well as captivating vocals from both clean vocalist Kyle Pavone and unclean vocalist David Stevens. Unlike many bands of this ilk, We Came as Romans promoted a positive message through their lyrics on this album, with lyrical themes often focusing on moving on and growing in a positive direction out of a negative situation. While this album doesn't reinvent the wheel or bring anything super crazy and new to the table, it is definitely a satisfying listen and is filled with a lot of very cool and memorable moments. Whether it be a catchy chorus or a cool breakdown or a captivating synth section, the band knew what they were doing, enough to bring forth a very solid and memorable metalcore record. One thing that makes this album stand out from the crowd during this time is, as I stated, the positive message in the lyrics and the general wholehearted, heartfelt vibe throughout the whole record. Unlike most of the records I've talked about, this collection of songs doesn't solely exist for the purpose of opening up the pit, having fun, or getting brutal. We Came as Romans bring a genuinity and sincerity to this style of music, which fans took note of, causing We Came as Romans to become one of the bigger metalcore acts during this time, and To Plant a Seed is a very beloved album by their fans and for fans of the whole RISECORE metalcore wave as a whole. So a year after Stand Up and Scream and To Plant a Seed came out, Sleeping with Sirens came in with their 2010 Rise Records debut with Ears to See and Eyes to Hear. Oh man, what a record. In fact, I already did a whole video about Sleeping with Sirens where I go fully in depth on this album as well as their entire career. So if you want to see me really expand on Kellen Quinn and the gang, you can go check out that video on my channel. But I'll get into the short and sweet nitty-gritty of this album for the sake of this video, because this album, as well as this band, were huge forces to be reckoned with during the whole RISECORE era. Now, before Sleeping with Sirens came out, with their more pop-punk-leaning sophomore record, Let's Cheers to This in 2011, featuring the gigantic hit If You Can't Hang. Before they were considered one of the biggest bands in the whole scene, not just RISECORE, they were a small new band with one record under their belt, playing in small clubs with other heavy, screamy acts, trying to make a name for themselves. With Ears to See and Eyes to Hear is a lot different from the other albums I've talked about thus far. While there are a fair share of breakdowns and screams and signature metalcore synth parts, this band brings a level of catchiness and poppiness that was simply lacking in most bands at this time. While With Ears to See and Eyes to Hear is certainly a metalcore and post-hardcore record at its core, this album has elements of pop punk, and even indie rock, which is primarily due to the vocal stylings of none other than Mr. Kellen Quinn. Dude had an incredibly high voice that sounds like it would be more fitting for a pop band, or even an indie rock act like Copeland or Daphne Loves Derby. However, the combination of this type of vocal style, paired with the metalcore music style of the time, resulted in a very unique, standout debut. Not to mention the songs are just goddamn good. If I'm James Dean, Your Audrey Hepburn is a certified scene classic, while the Bomb.com version 2.0 and Captain Tyanauts are true bangers. This blend of pop/metalcore definitely got shit on by purists back in the day, which is expected. Anything out of the box that actually works, it's going to have its fair share of haters at first. But 9 years later, this album holds up as a true landmark for this era of heavy music and has definitely earned its spot in the hearts of current and former scene kids all over the world. Oh yes, 2010 also brought us the debut from explosive yet short-lived metalcore act Woe Is Me. Featuring vocalist Tyler Carter and Michael Bond, who later went on to form the band Issues, as well as their drummer Austin Thornton, who came from the band Of Machines. Woe Is Me were full of talented dudes who made a truly special metalcore, post-hardcore record. Tyler Carter's vocals are a true standout and reminiscent of the soulful vocal stylings of Johnny Craig, who at the time was fronting Emma Rosa, and was the original vocalist of Dance Gavin Dance. Because of this, I sort of view this album as metalcore's answer to Dance Gavin Dance, considering Dance Gavin Dance were more of a experimental post-hardcore style act. This album even features 2 songs featuring the man himself, Johnny Craig. He's on this shit. The instrumentals were tight and crunchy and had lots of electronic elements, which is obviously a style utilized by many other metalcore acts after the dropping of this album. Michael Bond's screamed vocals are powerful and distinct and complement Tyler Carter's smooth vocals nicely. Overall, this record is a fun and interesting listen altogether, and it really shows you the kind of cool things this type of metalcore was really capable of. Take out the idea, of songs only existing for people to mosh to. Do what Woe Is Me did and throw in some well-crafted, out-of-the-box song structure. For example, there isn't a single chorus on this whole album. Throw in some progressive instrumentals, as well as some captivating vocals, and you've got a really standout and memorable record on your hands. And it's true, Woe Is Me blew up very quickly, and this record is still remembered very fondly to this day, and is looked back on as somewhat of a classic. This is partly due to the tumultuous demise of the band. Within a year and a half after Numbers was released, both vocalists Tyler Carter and Michael Bond left the band, as well as their bassist Corey Ferris and keyboardist Ben Ferris. That's like most of the band. Were gone within the touring cycle of this album. That's fucking crazy. It was kind of later brought to the table that their drummer Austin Thornton was like a huge shitbag and was ruining their lives, and which is why everybody left. But anyways, after all these people left, including both of the lead vocalists, Woe Is Me regrouped with new members, including 2 new vocalists, and the ex-Woe Is Me members started the band Issues. It's pretty obvious who came out swinging in the end, with Issues still being around and being one of the biggest bands in the scene still, and Woe Is Me having broken up after their second record. While an OG lineup Woe Is Me reuniting seems highly unlikely at this point, Numbers still shines as a classic record and a progressive mark for the metalcore wave at the time. Alright, motherfuckers, we're about to go there. What the fuck is Any tried and true scene kid was undoubtedly headbanging along to metalcore stalwarts of Mice and Men back in the day. A supergroup of sorts featuring former Attack Attack vocalist Austin Carlisle, which in itself contained enough hype to launch an entire career. Valentino Arteaga on drums, who was the former drummer of progressive metalcore post-hardcore act Lower Definition, who, holy shit, one of the most underrated bands ever. Lower Definition. Google them. Their album, called The Greatest of All Lost Arts, as well as their EP, Moths, are true works of art. I loved them in high school. It's post-hardcore done right, and it deserves a crazy amount of notoriety. Super underrated. I'll probably get into them in another video. But anyway, their drummer Valentino came from that band. Guitarist Phil Manansala, who came from the band Ecstatic Lullaby, even though I only believe he was just a touring member of that band, as well as their original clean vocalist and guitarist, although he later switched to bass, Shaylee Dayshell Bourget. He's now in the band Dayshell. Now, when their second album, The Flood, came out in 2011, it came enveloped in a mushroom cloud of hype. Why, you ask? Quick history lesson. Of Mice and Men began in 2009, releasing their debut album rather quickly, and making the rounds doing national tours with other metalcore acts right off the bat. Once again, coming from the hype of being Austin Carlisle's new band. They even went on the infamous Squash the Beef tour, featuring Emma Rosa and Dance Gavin Dance. That was a cool tour back in the day. After under a year of touring, right after the release of their debut, Austin Carlisle took what was originally supposed to be a temporary leave of absence from the band due to surgeries he had to get because of a heart condition that he has. Marfan syndrome. If you know anything about this, you know about Austin Carlisle. If not, Google it. The dude's sick. It sucks. Genetic disease. Anyway, he had to leave. Heart surgery. He was temporarily replaced by former Sky Eats Airplane vocalist Jerry Rausch. But before long, somewhere around April 2010, Of Mice and Men tweeted that Austin was officially out of the band and Jerry was the new official singer of Mice and Men. The band went on to subtly talk shit about Austin in interviews, with the girlfriend of original bassist Jackson Hall saying, quote, "It got to the point where the band, management, and even the record label wanted nothing to do with Austin Carlisle anymore." Okay, I'm just gonna sidetrack away from this Of Mice and Men album to get into some serious tea that transpired following Austin getting the boot from Of Mice and Men. Right after this happened and Austin was no longer in the band, Austin's other former band, Attack Attack, who I talked about earlier, who Austin was also kicked out from, posted this on their blog on their MySpace. Quote, "Boys and girls, we are here to address the new rumor that Austin is back in Attack Attack. I would first like to point out that it would be the coldest day in hell for him to get back in our band. To clear this whole thing up, we'll start with the history. Someday Came Suddenly. We recorded Someday Came Suddenly with Joey Sturgis in July of 2008 with Austin doing vocals. September 11th, 2008. We left Ohio with Austin in the band to go on our first tour ever, the Rise Records tour. 3 weeks later, we left him in a dark parking lot in Salt Lake City, Utah. He sat there and cried like a little girl while we drove away from him." I mean, to be fair, that's kind of messed up. If you're just leaving him stranded out in the middle of nowhere, I'd be pretty pissed too. I'd probably also cry, but that's neither here nor there. Facts! Austin would repeatedly claim that we were a Christian band on stage while being completely drunk and continuing to drink on stage. He abused his prescription medications, drank heavily, and slept with anything that crossed his path. He is an egotistical maniac and an arrogant jerk. We gave him everything. We gave him a family, our homes, our money, our love. All he did in return was throw it all back in our faces. He personally went out of his way to ruin Caleb's life on tour because Caleb tried to tell Austin that what he was doing was messed up. I could sit here all day and name off underage girls that he slept with, people he screwed over, stolen from, lied to, and used for his own selfish purposes. Austin made our band. Austin almost destroyed our band. The only reason we are where we're at right now is because all of us had the drive to push through all of that horse shit and do something with our lives. I can speak for everyone in the band when I say that all the rest of the dudes in Of Mice are some of the greatest people we have ever met. We love each and every single one of them. We also love all of our loyal fans that have stuck with us through all of the drama, all of the shit, because you know that there has to be a good reason for Austin's departure, which they were talking about from Of Mice and Men. This was after Austin got booted from Of Mice and Men, in case that wasn't perfectly clear. I can't describe how stoked we are that this can finally come to light. Austin, I know you're reading this. No respect. Wetzel and the rest of the band, attack, attack. Whew! Holy shit. That was like a call-out post before call-out posts were a thing. God damn. Whew! So Austin obviously isn't having a very good summer at this point, am I right? Also, fun side note, immediately after all this happened, the Jerry Roush-led of Mice and Men went on to open for Attack Attack on their This Is a Family headlining tour that summer. Spicy. Anyways, yeah, Mice and Men went on to the tour the remainder of the year with Jerry Roush at the helm, taking on vocal duties. However, no matter how badly his former bands wanted to paint him, it was not up for debate that Austin was simply a beast mode screamer at this time. Fans loved him, and fans did not love his replacement, Jerry Roush. In fact, fans openly hated Jerry Roush. And this makes sense, he had a very different vocal style than Austin, and stylistically just didn't fit the band super well. Not to mention he was known for forgetting the lyrics or getting the lyrics wrong while performing live on stage.
This song goes out to Austin Carlisle. I fucking don't like you, Austin Carlisle. Austin Carlisle is a motherfucking pussy.
Dude just wasn't very good live and looked super fucking awkward performing with the Mice and Men. Anyways, I don't know exactly what happened behind the scenes or what led to it. Maybe the fans' vocal outward hatred of Jerry and love for Austin was just deafening, because by January 2011, Austin was back into Mice and Men, and frankly, it was big fucking news. Fans across the world were stoked to see Mice and Men songs performed by Austin once again, and the band felt fresh and rejuvenated. The Flood was released in the summer of 2011, while the band was playing for huge crowds on the Warped Tour. And the album had reportedly the highest first week sales out of any album released on Rise Records up to that point. The hype for Of Mice and Men was real and practically fucking overflowing. It is a heavier and more technical album than their slightly more generic debut, featuring more vocals from clean vocalist Shaylee Bourget than the first album, whose angelic vocal stylings shine throughout the record. OG Loco is a true classic metalcore banger with a soaring, powerful chorus and some unforgettable breakdowns. My Understandings offers a softer side to the band, focusing on Shaylee's voice, as well as the song Purified, which pushed the band to new territory. Tracks like Still You Diggin' and Ohio Is on Fire proved the band had the concept of metalcore down pat and truly knew what the fuck they were doing. The Flood was possibly the peak of Rise Records metalcore as we knew it. Following this record, the genre stayed prevalent for a few more years, but the bands were becoming more and more generic, and not many standout releases really followed. Before long, all the OG bands like Attack Attack and Mice and Men or Alexandria had either broken up or started to do more of a butt rock, kind of nu metal type sound. Some bands like Bless the Fall or The Devil Wears Prada still carry the metalcore torch, but it isn't the hype-filled cash cow that it once was in its heyday. And that's pretty much it. Those are the records that I picked as the essential ones. Obviously, there are more. I didn't talk about Bring Me the Horizon, even though they were also huge. I feel like that's kind of a whole, they would deserve their own video. You know what I mean? Just because of the sheer importance of that band. You know, there were a ton of other ones. There was Enter Shikari, Parkway Drive, The Plottin' You. There were a ton of bands during this time. But these ones I feel like were the ones that made really big impacts at the time, and I just thought it'd be interesting to talk about them. I don't know. This was a truly interesting time in music and culture, and, you know, I don't know if something like this, like the CRABCORE wave, will ever really happen again. You know what I mean? It was like, it was a you had to be there kind of thing, and I'm thankful that I was there. I saw Attack Attack live on Warped Tour 2011. It was crazy. Caleb Shomo was killing it. You know, when I think of Caleb Shomo, I think of that little dude behind the keyboard in Attack Attack, and he eventually, you know, became the vocals or whatever. Anyway, I'm not going to ramble on. I don't want this to be some big, long video. But yeah, so those were my, I guess, 7 essential Rise Records core, CRABCORE, metalcore albums. This has been Julian, your boy, the Cozy Representative. I'm trying to get more videos up. I have a lot of ideas for videos, and I'm trying to get them out quicker because I like doing it. So yeah, hopefully you enjoyed. I hope you have a beautiful rest of your day. Peace out, y'all.